Hey everyone, this is Madison, and welcome back to another issue of My Mad Reviews. This review is regarding iRobot featuring Will Smith. I did write the article itself on my blog site last week. You know, it was issued on Thursday, and at least I believe I issued it out on Thursday. I can't keep track anymore because I have so much going on right now. But anyway, I failed to do the follow-up video for it, so here it is. And I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible this time. I'm really trying for that. But anyway, so in iRobot, you know, Will Smith plays Detective Spooner, and he is the core character in this movie. Right from the very beginning, you know, I didn't find a lot of plot holes, but I did find a lot of like unanswered questions or very vague answers to questions, and some very what the hell is going on with this? Section of the movie moments. No plot holes really, just things that just didn't add up. But anyway, so right off the bat, we know from the very beginning that Detective Spooner does not like robots. He makes this abundantly clear when he opens his door to leave, and there's a robot, a delivery robot, standing on his doorstep with a package, which is an obvious endorsement. Even though the robot can't finish saying where he's delivering from, we still see the logo on his chest. But before the robot can finish, he immediately shoves his hand in its face and says, "Get the hell out of my face, Canner." Well, first of all, we see that he doesn't like robots from that right there. But second of all, the term canner effectively comes across as an insult, indicating that he sees robots as nothing more than a glorified can opener. But that's really not the problem in this scene. The problem in this scene is that earlier, right before he left, we see Detective Spooner opening a package that may have been delivered the day before or whatever, and he pulls out a pair of mint condition shoes that he had bought, and he later refers to them as a vintage all-star 2004. Now, the movie takes place in Chicago of 2035, so these shoes are around 31 years old. They look like they're in mint condition, so obviously he's a heavy buyer because these shoes are probably considered, or at least pushing towards the term antiques. So here we have a robot attempting to deliver a package to him, and okay, fine, he doesn't like them, he wants to insult them, but he doesn't take the package. He's at the door. He easily could have just taken the package from the robot, shoved it in his door, shut it, and gone on about his merry way, or taken it, put it under his arm, and gone about his merry way. It doesn't matter. Either way, the package was right there in front of his face, and he does nothing with it. So that leaves the robot with two options. A, leave it on his doorstep, which is not a great option, because I'm pretty sure it's not going to last on his doorstep unattended very long. Or B, return it back to the delivery facility, in which case Detective Spooner would have to make a detour on his way home to re-pick up the package that was already presented to him right in front of his face, right then and there. So it makes no sense, even though you're insulting robots and you want to give off the impression that you don't like them, that you wouldn't take a package of something that you ordered and have probably been waiting for. When you don't like robots, so your other option is either wait for another delivery, or go stop by the company who's holding your package that is probably 95% or more ran by robots anyway. And I know this because it's painfully evident that the economy has more than likely gone to shit, because it looks about like 75%, possibly even much more than that, of the workforce is now run by robots. We see them doing the garbage, delivering packages, walking dogs. We even see a robot bartender, for crying out loud, in a later scene where he's sitting at the bar with his chief. So given that information, there's most likely a staggering amount of people on welfare, if it even still exists at that time, and or unemployment. Again, even if that exists at that particular time in the world, and the likelihood of a human landing a lower to middle class job, or even one involving manual labor for that matter, seems to be sorely impossible with the fact that robots are being implemented everywhere in the workforce that they can be. Why? Because they don't require wages. They don't require benefits. All you have to do is routine maintenance, shut them down at the end of the day, and shove them in a closet. You don't have to worry about them being late for work. You don't have to worry about them messing up their job. You don't have to worry about them getting sick. I mean, you might have to worry about one or two of them needing repairs or, whatever, upgrades, maintenance, what have you. But overall, it seems like, they are being opted over humans for the majority of mundane jobs because they are more effective. They can do it faster and better and don't have to be paid. They're not going to complain. They're not going to get sick or have babies or have pregnancy, leave or whatever the case may be, a death in the family. They're low maintenance, so that there are a high number of people not working because their jobs or the potential for them to have a job is gone. It's been replaced by robots. So we get the idea that this might also contribute to one of the reasons that Spooner has a dislike for robots, when coupled with the fact that during a car accident in his past, his car and that of another were pinned together and shoved over a bridge, and they were both underwater, and a robot came by and assessed that Spooner had a higher survival rate than the little girl in the other car, who was named Sarah, and so the robot rescued Spooner instead of him, even though he was, telling the robot, rescue the little girl instead, but the robot didn't. His survival rate percentage was higher than that of the girls, so he opted to save Spooner, and thus leaving the little girl to drown. So now we've kind of really sunk into why Spooner distrusts robots and dislikes them, all right there in that one scenario. But so next, a little further into the movie, in the very beginning, we see Spooner visiting his grandmother that he calls Gigi, and she's cooking. I guess in the future that's what grandmothers do, because it seems like every time they show a grandmother in a movie, she's always cooking. Like grandmothers don't have other things they like to do. I know my grandmother liked to play rummy and things like that. She didn't cook all the time, but this one seems to be cooking all the time. Anyway, so they have a brief chat, etc., and then Spooner takes a pie, one of the pies, I think it was sweet potato pie that Gigi had made, and leaves for work. And so now Spooner is on his way to work with a pie in hand when he spots a robot running down the street with a purse. So and one of the funny parts is when he, presents a pie to a stranger passing by and says, "Hold my pie," and the guy just looks at him like, "What?" And he's like, "Hold it or wear it." Yeah, you actually think you're going to go chasing after a robot and then find this guy with your pie later on? He's got places to go too. He's probably going to work. He's not going to stand there and wait for you to come retrieve your pie. But anyway, so, the guy takes the pie and Spooner runs off chasing after this robot with a purse. So this is when we get a really good idea of exactly how deep his distrust and dislike for robots are. So let's recap from the very beginning what we're told about robots. There are the 3 laws of robotics that we are shown in text format in the opening sequence. And they are as follows. Law number 1. A robot may not injure a human being or, through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm. Law number 2. A robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. Law number 3. A robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. So it seems to be, a pretty tight-sealed set of laws of protection to prevent people from getting hurt or, prevent them from committing crimes and, or what have you, or allowing people to come to harm, even to the point where they would sacrifice themselves if it meant saving another human being. Because that's what they're hardwired to do, is to aid and protect humans, even at the risk of themselves. So this is supposed to be a very well-known fact that each robot is instilled with these laws first and foremost before any additional programming is built in or installed. So when we see Spooner spying a robot running with a purse, he immediately forces the stranger to take his pie and then goes into a hot pursuit, assuming the robot stole the purse. So he's seen repeatedly yelling, "Stop," which he the robot doesn't. And of course, Will Smith does his grand, he's always jumping from like a bridge or a building onto a truck or whatever. So he continues to, pursuing this robot, always, yelling, stop, stop, I said stop. And eventually he tackles the robot, ironically, right in front of the robot's owner. The purse gets thrown to the ground, all the contents are scattered everywhere, blah, blah, blah. The woman's asthmatic, she has an inhaler in her hand and mouth. And, then he's made aware that the robot and the purse belong to the woman who's sitting there. So naturally, since she's asthmatic and was having an asthma attack, it was running back to her house in order to get the inhaler to her as quickly as possible. So it was running back with the purse, which clearly explains why it disobeyed Spooner's constant demands to stop and simply kept running with the purse. Because the robot could not stop, not even long enough to tell Spooner why he was running with a purse, because that would be violation of Law 1, because stopping would imply acting in a way to bring about harm to the robot's owner, the asthmatic woman. Additionally, Law 2, since it states that a robot must obey orders given to it unless it conflicts with the first law, stopping would have done so again because his owner could have died had she not gotten her inhaler on time, so it had to obey her order and disregard Spooner's, since her order was more prominent in preventing her death. Stopping for Spooner would have been disobeying his owner's order, violating Law 2 as well, and stopping for Spooner could have resulted in her death, disobeying Law 1. Now, one thing I found interesting was when Spooner was called into U.S. Robotics, because one of the co-founders, Dr. Alfred Landing, that we later, we find out very quickly actually that he had some type of relationship with, he was found dead from having presumably jumped out of his office window, so everyone assumed it was a suicide. And Spooner was interacting with a hologram that Landing had left for him. And their conversation is very brief, and whenever Spooner asks a clearly plain, indirect question, such as, is there anything that you're trying to tell me? The hologram replies with, I'm sorry, my answers are limited, you must ask the right questions. Well, okay, fair enough. But Spooner always ends up asking the right questions, but on Landing's end, in all fairness, when he was creating this hologram and its responses, how many possible correct ones were also programmed in that Spooner did not ask? I mean, and it's really neither here nor there in the movie in the grand scheme of things. It's just something I was wondering, because I can see how easy it would have been to have the blanket response when posed with an incorrect or a question that it could not directly answer, but I would think it would be much more difficult to sit down and ponder how many correct questions the detective might ask regardless of how long they've known each other or in what capacity they knew each other in. So it's like, so we have, the introduction between Spooner and Landing's hologram. Easy enough. We have the blanket response whenever the hologram cannot answer a question. But the key part of the entire engagement that leaves me wondering how much work went into the responses is when Spooner states that a homicide detective would not be the typical person to call in such a situation, and Landing's hologram responds with, but then our interactions have never been entirely normal, wouldn't you agree? So it kind of makes the whole flow of the conversation feel very natural and very, one-on-one natural, like he's really there, except for when he has to answer with the blanket response of, you have to ask the right question. But that response just seems too well planned, as if Landing knew exactly what questions his hologram would be asked by Spooner. So it begs to question what other, again, if any possible questions versus answered were programmed into it as well, but I guess it really doesn't matter at all. But so a little later on in the movie, Spooner is being accompanied by a woman named, I guess, a psychiatrist called Dr. Calvin during his investigation of U.S. robotics. A friend of his, Dr. Landing, presumably committed suicide. He's a cop. He was called in by the hologram. Apparently, Landing wanted him to do an investigation of his death, so he does so, and Dr. Calvin is accompanying him. So they proceed to Dr. Landing's office, and this is when we're introduced to Vicky, the building's positronic operating core, whose name stands for Virtual Interactive Kinetic Intelligence. Spooner asked for the camera feed from inside Lanning's office 1 minute prior to his death, to which there's a lot of white snow, and Vicky proclaims that there appears to be data corruption. He then asked for the feed from the moment of the death from outside the office till that point, and you see a lot of people coming and going, presumably investigators and things like that. So this lends to Spooner's verification of his suspicion that the killer might still be inside the office, because he refuses to believe that Dr. Lanning killed himself. So they end up in the room, and they're chit-chatting, whatever, and then upon inspecting the room, Spooner examines the window that was smashed open that has this huge hole in it that Lanning supposedly smashed himself and threw himself out of. So there's another window right next to it intact, and Spooner decides to pick up a nearby stool and smash it. He's a presumably, a somewhat young, strong male, and he can't even smash a hole in the glass either because it's safety glass. Now, the glass does shatter, but it stays intact in the frame because it's safety glass. So he remarks to Dr. Calvin that, Dr. Lanning would have been too old and too weak to have broken that glass the way that it was on his own. So he had to have had help, or somebody had to have done it and thrown him out. And she just kind of brushes it off, whatever. So anyway, so they're walking about and they're discussing the 3 laws, and he's like, yeah, whatever. I still don't believe it's bullshit, and I don't trust them. And this is when we first meet Sonny, the robot that the movie revolves around. Detective Spooner is, talking to Calvin, and he's sifting through some part bins, and Sonny leaps out of a pile of robot parts as he does a flip in the air, knocking Spooner's gun out of his hand onto the floor. Calvin deactivates the robot with a typical command, and it appears that Sonny the robot complies, as we see the lights in its frame dim and the sound of what I guess is indicative of it shutting down. Then, in mid-conversation, it suddenly springs back to life, snatches the gun from Calvin's hand, because she retrieved it from the floor, and points it at Spooner while slowly making its way towards the door. And Spooner, Calvin actually asked Vicky to seal the room, and Spooner didn't want her to, but Vicky listened to Calvin anyway. So the robot jumps out of the window, the same window that Lanning jumped out of. So what we gauge here from the action already that this robot took is that Dr. Lanning apparently created a robot under the nose of the very company he worked for, inside the building of the company he worked for, right in his own office, undetected. Now, I can understand having like a minute of your inside office camera feed being distorted or blocked or whatever, but as long as it would have taken him to have created this robot, programmed it, and interacted with it, would have been a very long time, at least long enough for somebody to have been alerted that, Dr. Lanning's office is inaccessible. We have no idea what he's doing in there. Maybe there's a malfunction with the camera feed, the security feed. Let's go investigate this. But nobody ever bothers. And I guess seniority and his position probably allowed that to happen. I don't know. They don't even touch on that. But it just seems not ironic, but implausible that he could go that long creating a robot, programming it, working with it, undetected, without anybody batting an eyelash as to why his security feed and camera feed is no longer working in his office. And so this then leads Calvin and Spooner heading to the core factory to try and track down the rogue robot, where Spooner and the robot have a brief chase before the robot escapes outside, and then is apprehended, though, and hauled away into the precinct because he had called in for backup on the way there. So since Spooner already obviously has a huge dislike for robots to begin with, he is now pleading with his boss to allow him to interrogate the robot, because he now believes that the robot killed Dr. Lanning. Or Professor Lanning, I can't remember. Doctor, Professor, whatever. So Spooner is now in the office with the robot. He lays out photos of Dr. Lanning's corpse from the crime scene in front of the robot, who touches one and then has a genuine look of surprise and confusion on its face. And when addressed as Canner, the robot then proclaims that his name is Sonny. And he also refers to Lanning as his father, who was teaching him human emotions, he says. So he even tells Spooner that not only does he sleep, but he has dreams as well. And Spooner continues on and on. You don't have dreams. You're not real. You're imitation of life. Dogs have dreams. Blah blah blah. You don't. Blah blah blah. And even though the robot already said yes, I do. I sleep and dream. Um, and but Spooner just keeps digging and digging and digging, and Sonny keeps repeating, somewhat the same response over and over. I did not murder Dr. Lanning, and he is obviously on the outward. You see that he's getting agitated more and more and angrier each time until he finally is so enraged that he slams his fist into the table, leaving deep indents into it. And then towards the end of the exchange, Sonny says, quote, Dr. Lanning killed himself. I don't know why he wanted to die. I thought he was happy. Maybe it was something I did. Now, I want you to remember that one complete segment right there throughout this whole review. Dr. Lanning killed himself. So now here is where the issue begins. If he didn't kill Lanning, then I can understand his outburst of anger at being accused of something he is innocent of. Yet at the end of the movie, he confesses that he did, in fact, kill him. Lanning had created a robot that could ignore the 3 laws and then ordered Sonny to kill him. Now, I find it very conflicting that in one scene he would act so visibly enraged and then switch to confessing to the crime in the end of the movie with so much sorrow in his voice and face. These two exchanges are extremely conflicting. Why bother getting angry at something you did when you were accused of it, when there's no reason for a showcase of extreme emotion of anger if you're actually guilty of the crime? And as Sonny states in the end, he said, I had to promise to do one favor. He made me swear before he'd tell me what it was he wanted me to do. He made me swear. He said it was what I was made for. So we see a very confusing exchange of proclamations from Sonny, first stating that he did not kill him, to suddenly confessing that he did, one with anger, the other with sadness. These two scenes do not correlate very well at all, so why lie about it in the first place? What was the rationale behind lying about it in the beginning just to admit to it later? And why did being accused of what he did do make him so angry? Additionally, we are still not told how. Okay? We are not told exactly how the events unfolded. Did he simply have to smash the window open for Lanning so Lanning could jump on his own? Or did he throw him out of the window as well? I mean, if all he did was smash the window and then Lanning jumped on his own, then that could explain his self-entitled belief in the beginning that he did not directly kill Lanning, but then later on realized that in doing so, he was partially inadvertently responsible for his death and now feels as if he is guilty of it. So there is no real or thorough explanation as how the death actually took place, just that Sonny was made to promise to do it, whatever it was, and before being told what it was he had to do. So this question is never answered. Never answered. It is a vague and inconclusive ending for a movie that otherwise, to me, was very well done, and I enjoy very thoroughly. But let us not also forget the scene where Spooner went to Lanning's house at night to look around. Okay, there's a demo bot sitting there, and Lanning queries the demo bot as to what time it's set to demolish Lanning's house. It states 8:30 a.m., so Spooner goes in because he's there the night before. Well, we know by the end of the movie that it was Vicky behind all the mayhem, but we are unaware of it at this point. We kind of, at this point, we're led to believe that it possibly might be the person who's running the U.S. robotics instead of Vicky. But all of a sudden, the demobot turns on and begins to demolish the house with Spooner and Lanning's cat still inside. And I'm not questioning why the demobot's time changed from 8:30 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. We already know the answer to that. Vicky reset the programming when she realized that he was in the house. And we also already know that it probably has a safety mechanism to scan for life sources just in case, so it doesn't demolish a house with people or living creatures inside of it. But we also know that Vicky overrode that as well. You know, I'm not stupid. What I'm debating here is why in the hell is the house being demolished? Does no one believe in real estate anymore? I mean, that's a perfectly good house with a pool in the back being torn down instead of being emptied, then sold on the market. I mean, I understand that there is, US robotic sensor feeds throughout the house, but those could have easily been uninstalled and all the furniture sold as well. Obviously, he doesn't have family to pass his, physical possessions to, but there was no reason to rip down a whole house, and that house was gorgeous. Just clean it out and then sell it on the market for somebody else. I mean, yeah, some people are going to be a little squeamish that it belonged to somebody who died, but considering that it was Dr. Lanning, they could probably actually up the price. But back to the interrogation room for one moment before we end this here. I did notice one actual oopsie visually on their part in the movie. After Sonny smashed the table and then went to the part where he was stating that Dr. Lanning killed himself, he was looking at the photos again, so we have a clear view of the table's surface. Now, when he smashed the table, he left these huge indents in the table. We're shown this. But later, when he's back to looking at the photos and the camera pans to the table surface, it's intact again. It's smooth. It's flat. Now, unless it's made of some type of, metal alloy that fixes itself, I don't know what happened here. So it had to be an error on their part because we have two, fist indents, then a perfectly straight flat table. So that was just like the one little flaw that I saw in the movie. Now, my last points are these that occurred during the fight scene in the road tunnels and one flashback, again, to the interrogation. While the robot and Spooner are fighting in the tunnel, we never see any other cars passing by at all, ever. It's a road. No cars are going to and fro. And he was attacked by an army of robots from two separate U.S. robotic vehicles that cornered him, one in front and one behind. Yet there's no evidence of these vehicles or these robots later, and when everyone arrives at the scene, even though they were called in because Spooner supposedly ran two vehicles off the road, there are no two vehicles. There's no robots either. So they are not there when his boss and everyone else arrives. Did Vicky have them replaced with, two normal looking vehicles while the robots were done attacking him? Because the chief asked when he tells him I was attacked by robots, he says, what robots? And these, like I said, these robots and vehicles are no longer there. So where did they go? I mean, it's like, where did they go? You're called in because your detective ran two cars off the road, but there's nothing there when you get there. There's just him and his car. So it's like, if I were, called in because my detective ran two vehicles off the road and I got there and there was no evidence of any crash having taken place other than his car, I would kind of question that. And And then that big blue flame looking thing that the one robot that was swinging around at the end that he was fighting with when it was just him and that last robot. What the hell was that? And did one other robot did they all jump into that? What the hell was that? So at least now the overall economy can begin to improve because after all of this, U.S. robotics and any other robot making company in competition are going to have their stocks plummet. No one is going to trust robots ever again, not even their older models, and humans can once again have a chance at landing a job in the workforce. So all in all, Alfred Lanning's death will probably be heralded as a new dawn of the job market once it is opened up again to humans instead of robots. Ah, hell, who am I kidding? We're too addicted to our technology. There will be a new run of robots shortly thereafter, and the demand just as great after the initial shock and the conspiracy theories go down. Because if there's one other thing we humans are addicted to outside of our technology, is a good old-fashioned conspiracy theory, even when the truth is juicier than the lie. Oh, and as for that perfect circle of protection gained from the 3 laws of robotics, yeah. We know from computer experience that as soon as you implement a security feature, someone else is already out there working on breaking it, so you can't convince me one bit that there has never been in the history of robotics a robot that hadn't been hacked. Ciao.